Hi, my name is Joe and I run games, and the game that I ran this time is Draw Steel. Or is it? Let's talk about it. Specifically, we are talking about my Tower of Time Draw Steel campaign. I don't usually do campaign diaries for this one. This isn't actually really a campaign diary. This is more like a lesson I learned while running Draw Steel. Basically, this is the Draw Steel campaign that I have been running since basically 5 minutes after James told us not to start Draw Steel campaigns because it was way too early. And he was right, but I did it anyway. My players knew that the rules were going to change, and we have had quite a few changes since things started. The biggest change that we have undergone since starting this campaign was not power roll charts or changes to classes or the disappearance of, funky dice. It was adding a troubadour. The characters are fourth level going on fifth level. And right when they hit fourth level, we added a troubadour by the name of Baldric. Baldric is a dragon born, a dragonling. In my campaign, we call them worm whites. He's a worm white troubadour. And he is an auteur in every sense of the word. The thing you need to know about Baldric, first off, is that his name is a Blackadder joke. And so his mentor is another troubadour by the name of Rickert Flashirt. But his stage name is Florid Flash. He is also a Shockballow or a Worm White troubadour. He is just much higher level than Baldric. Baldric came into play with a complication called betrothed, and that just means you are engaged to be married to someone. In Baldric's case, he thought that he was engaged to maybe Florid's secret daughter or a cousin or something like that. No. Since level 1, my players have been hearing rumors about Queen Zin and how she is in the market for a new husband. And if you are having flashbacks to the D&D cartoon right now, congratulations. When my players hit second or third level, they heard rumors that Queen Zin had in fact been married and that there was going to be sort of a wedding and a party at her place. Now, my players didn't look into the rumors right before they went to Castle Zin, but if they had, they would have encountered rumors that her marriage had fallen through or had been annulled, or depending on how well they rolled, they might have learned, that she was keeping her husband in the cellar or that she had given him a sack of money and sent him home. All of these things were viable rumors, only one of them was true. But the reason they didn't look into that is because when Baldric got back to the Tower of Coin and Swords, where the PCs live, he had a letter from Florid Flash, and that letter said, I don't remember exactly what it said. It's written down somewhere. I was looking to see if I had it in my notes. I don't. But basically, it said, the time has come for you to fulfill your oath. Your wedding will take place in 3 weeks' time. I will meet you at Castle Zin. Okay. Well, Baldric comes from a very traditional people. And also, it's the complication on his character sheet. He's not going to ignore this. He could have, I guess, but we would have had to swap out for a new complication then, wouldn't we? But he put it on his sheet for a reason, so the party packs up and they go to Castle Zin. Those of you who are familiar with the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon episode that contains Queen Zin will recognize a lot of this plot, but the real short version is they get there, they see Baldric's mentor, he says, I'm sorry, big misunderstanding. Go home. Castle's closed. Everybody go home. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? And he's like, everything is fine here. Just turn around. And Baldric's like, I don't think that's actually him. And then of course he turned into a, amalgamation of undead monster things and attacked the party. We had a fight, the amalgamation things fly off, and the PCs get to Castle Zin, where they meet the real Florid Flash, who is like, you're late. And they are introduced to his lawyer and his retinue. They meet Queen Zin, and her servants are there, and they sort of begin looking around the castle. Basically, they're given exactly your standard fantasy castle spiel. Have a good time. Here's your rooms. Nobody go in the West Wing. You get it. They poke around. Things are obviously suspicious, and but ultimately, they're just going to go through with the wedding. Like the PCs, not Baldric, end up having a fight with some like zombie things in the basement. Queen Zin is very standoffish when they confront her about it. The whole thing is suspicious as hell. And the conduit PC decides that he is going to perform the wedding ceremony. Fine, Queen Zin doesn't object. So he performs and performs and performs and performs. And the idea is he's stretching this thing out just to see what'll happen, because Queen Zin is getting more and more nervous as it gets closer and closer to sunset. And then right as the sun sets the sky, she freaks out, turns into a giant, terrible hunger beast, and tries to eat the party, starting with Baldric. Now, these are 4th level draw steel characters. They dispatch her pretty handily, right? I mean, she's no slouch in a fight, of course, but they dispatch her and she dies. At which point in time, Florid's like, well, that didn't work at all. And he sits the PCs down and he explains what's actually going on here. What's actually going on here is thus. Several hundred years ago, Florid Flash, a young troubadour at the time, fulsome in his ego, came to perform at the wedding of Queen Zin. Her family was here, her father, her mother, her brother, her fiance, all her friends, and the wedding was lovely. And at the wedding, all of the guests began to get sick. They had been poisoned. And the queen suddenly gets up, I suppose she's a princess at this point, gets up and runs out of the room. Now, she is a famous herbalist. It does not take a genius to put 1 and 1 together in this particular case and get 3. And Florid Flash decides that she has poisoned everyone. These people are all dying. And so he calls out to the mad gods of the south, this bevy of human gods who are among the deities who had been invoked during the wedding, because these were humans getting married. So, of course, they invoked human gods. And he says, if you guys are still watching, this is what should happen. And he tells them that she should be trapped in this terrible moment for an eternity. However, the problem is he was wrong. Because what actually happened at the wedding of Queen Zin is that her brother, in his haste to take the throne from her, decided to poison the wedding feast, getting rid of his parents, his sister, her fiance, and her entire court, thereby leaving himself sole heir and the only member of the royal family left alive. He was going to take the throne by force, a custard-based coup, if you will. Don't do that. The mad gods of the south responded to this young troubadour's words. In my brain, I imagine that some DM in the prehistory of Draw Steel was like, okay, go ahead, make a roll. And he's like, I got a crit, what happens? Womp, 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 womp. But what he thinks, and this is really important, this is super central to the plot. He keeps telling the PCs this over and over again. What he thinks is that he had one chance as a troubadour to really reach into his soul and latch onto his best magic and do the most important thing he would ever do. And he thinks he wasted it on something terrible. And he has tried many times since then to undo this magic, and ultimately has never been successful. And I know, sort of above board, that that's just because he didn't think he could do it, right? He tried a lot of stuff that didn't work, and ultimately all they've ever been able to do, he and Queen Zin, is sort of push the curse around. She can use marriage contracts to sort of siphon the curse into her husbands, and sometimes that leaves them ravenous beasts constantly, and sometimes they write up more clever contracts and they only have to be ravenous beasts once a month or once a season or something. The contract with Baldric, by the way, had it gone through, would have been the sort of thing where he has to come in once a season for a few days and do service to the Kingdom of Zin, which is to say she would shackle him up in the basement, he would be hungry for a few days, and then he'd go home, which, if I'm honest, is actually not a bad deal for being the King of Zin. It's reasonable. But the problem here is, and this has always been the case, and this is sort of the twist that the mad gods of the south put on all this, is that none of this works if it's insincere. That is to say, none of this works if you know about the curse. Queen Zin's husband has to want to be her husband. He doesn't have to be in love with her or anything, but he has to want to be her husband. He can't just be some guy that wants to help alleviate her curse, because the mad gods of the south are, as the name might imply, less than stable. They don't always agree on stuff. They're a lot like fairies in that respect. So this is a poetic curse. And the PCs were like, well, at least we fixed that. And Florid Flash is like, oh no, she'll be back when the seasons change. She always is. You think if it were that easy, I wouldn't have done it by now? Okay, fine. That's fair. So now we know where we stand. We have a cursed queen who is going to come back hungry. We have all of the guests from her wedding, who over the centuries have sort of lost their identities and just become this sort of amalgamation of blank people who act as her servants. And the PCs, while they were investigating the house, also found Queen Zin's brother. That guy is like 700 years old, and he looks it. Because long ago, Queen Zin, in an act of vengeance, bound their life forces together and said, look, I'm here as long as you are. You're here as long as I am. But you don't have the benefit of a curse keeping you eternally young. So he just gets to basically rot up there in his bedroom. And she is not ready to make nice. We finished the session before this right there. And what I say is, look, verbatim, I have no set solution in place here. There's a lot of stuff that might work. The criteria is probably going to be A, that it makes some sense given the nature of the curse. B, it makes for a good story. Bonus points if it is also an exciting session. That's it. Run with it. And they talked for basically 2 weeks. They came up with a ton of cool ideas. They came up with a ton of stuff. You know, they had quite a few ideas that I thought could work. They had quite a few ideas that I thought probably would not work. And ultimately, when I sat down to write my notes, I was like, okay, here's what's going to happen. The stuff that I thought would be necessary or would be best would be if some human gods are invoked. These are humans that the curse is upon. They were the ones that were invoked to create this curse. It seems like it would be a very hard thing to do to lift this curse without them. Not impossible. Maybe the PCs could come up with something. But I thought, well, here's what happens if they invoke the mad gods of the south. And just for good measure, here's what happens if they also call the benevolent gods of the east. The idea being you call these guys in to sort of temper some of the worst impulses of the gods of the south. I left room for them to call all human gods plus many other beings. I wrote up like 4 different, scenarios here. And lastly, I wrote up a quick scenario for here's what happens if they conjure nothing. And I want to be clear, by what happens, I mean, I'm just setting the stage here. I didn't assume what was going to happen. So I want to talk real quick about what did happen, because I think it was really fascinating. Once we got together, we sat down, they still talked this over for about another hour. And what they ultimately decided is we are going to invoke the gods of the south. We are also going to invoke the gods of the east just to pull in some extra help. And like we're going to do this right when Queen Zin comes back, which will be on the 1st of spring. For some reason, Florid seemed to know when the 1st of spring was going to happen, despite the fact that the 1st of spring is kind of a crapshoot in this world. But they didn't ask how he knew, and so I didn't tell them. I didn't have an answer to that question either, but I would have made something up. I mean, the guy's a 10th level adventurer. He's seen some shit. I'm going to read through this thing that I said, because it's neat. The first good storm of spring rolls in from the south, bringing with it wicked peals of thunder and light that illuminates the arch of the sky. Big, fat drops of rain fall heavily and lazily. But from the east comes a wind that calms and cools, fighting against the oncoming storm, causing gusts that curl hot air up and drag the cold back down, chilling your skin. Sometimes the lightning is followed by peals of thunder. Other times, it's followed by sharp laughter, whispers, or burbles in languages your mouth could never make. And astride it all is the air laying thick with expectation, waiting for your words. And I looked at Baldric. This guy's playing a troubadour, right? And a really arch troubadour. And Baldric, at the table, told the tale of Queen's Inn. But he told that tale as a tragedy. He told it knowing everything that had happened that night. And he told it as a sad tale of a young woman who was betrayed by her brother and cursed by happenstance, and who was suffering endlessly for no fucking reason. That's the sort of thing that the mad gods of the south think is hilarious. But there are also eastern gods that have been summoned here. And Baldric invoked them. And he said, justice has not been done here. And if there must be a hunger in this land, make it for justice. Make it for the hearts and minds of the people of Zin. Make it a hunger to better these lands. And if someone has to bear that curse, if she still has to bear that curse, I will bear it alongside her. Meanwhile, Jacques, the party's shadow, he had sort of gone to the section of the garden where darker plants are found. And he found having returned with Queen Zin, a now extinct type of poisonous plant. This is the only place you can find it in the whole world. And that is the poison that her brother had used to kill everyone in the wedding party. And he started gathering it up, and he runs it over to Sraelyn. Sraelyn is a void elementalist, hands it off to her, and she plunged it into some wedding broth. And she is steeping poison into the broth in sort of a parody of what this brother, I think his name was Philip, and what Philip had done at the wedding. And then she took a cup of that in a mug and just put it next to Philip. They had sort of brought him out and propped him up in a chair, Weekend at Bernie's style, and he can't move, right? The guy's 700 years old. His body doesn't work, but they propped it up there anyway. And what happens is, from Philip's mouth come the voices of the gods, and the gods of the South, asking why on earth they should care about this, right? I mean, like, yeah, they did this, but they're gods. What do they care? And Baldric said, look, if you don't care that this woman has been wrongly punished, if you don't care that this man has gotten away with mass murder for 700 years, that's okay. But aren't you tired of this? This is the same thing over and over again. Letting justice be done here will change up the narrative. That'll give you guys something interesting to see. Change the channel, right? That's not unappealing to them. And there was a voice from the east, a young voice that spoke through Philip and said to Baldric, are you really willing to marry her? I mean, I know you're betrothed, but you don't have to. Are you really willing to marry this woman now that you know all this? And Baldric said, yeah, I think I actually am. If it will be good for the people of Zin, if it'll be good for her, and more importantly, if it will see this wrong righted, then yeah, I'll do that. At which point in time, Philip, desiccated, arthritic, naughty Philip, reaches his gross hand out and picks up the mug and drinks down its contents. There is a flash of lightning with no following thunder, and when it is done, the sky is clear, and we are back to a fresh spring day. The garden has gone back to its previous condition. There is dust where Philip had been sitting, and that leaves the PCs and Florid and his retinue and the Queen of Zin, who turns to the party and says, oh, I'm dying. And the party's like, oh no, what can we do about it? And she's like, nothing. It's just, it'll probably take 30 years or so. Now here's the thing. Did we play Draw Steel? I don't know. They all had Draw Steel sheets in front of them. I don't think there was a single dice roll. But that story wouldn't have happened in a different game, or it would have been a very different story if it had. So, I don't know. I think we played Draw Steel. Drop a note in the comments. Tell me if you think we played Draw Steel that night. What I will say is my party got enough victories out of that to take them to level 5. They received rewards. They all got the Gardener title, which is bestowed upon them by the Queen of Zin, which gave them the nature skill if they didn't already have it. And they got to choose from having poison immunity 5, or their weapon attacks dealing 2 bonus poison damage, or their weapon attacks dealing 2 bonus corruption damage. Everyone except Baldric got that title because, of course, Baldric is now the king apparent of Zin. They're not married yet, but they probably will be. He also received the Crown of Zin, which is an ugly 5-pronged crown, and it's a treasure. And what it does is each prong of the crown can receive a magic ring. So it gives you extra magic ring slots. And what I told him is this: you can put up to 5 rings on this crown. They will interact with each other. It's probably going to be hilarious. I don't know what that means yet. Apart from that, we need to change Baldric's complication. But it went really well. We went into a downtime after that. And you guys know how downtimes go. So that was all. I just wanted to share that story. This is probably too long, but I thought it was a really interesting session, and I like sessions with no dice rolls. Nobody seemed like they were having a hard time with it. Sort of midway through, I think some of the players were trying to push him one way or the other, and then ultimately they kind of all went, yeah, this is actually his story. And a big part of why I did this was because he had missed out on 3 levels of plot. and 3 levels of bonding with these characters and 3 levels of developing his own tales. And so I kind of wanted to put the spotlight on just him for a while, catch him up narratively, so to speak. And we have certainly done that. So now we're on to see if we can't save High-Hold Immencel. Probably not going to do any videos about that, but you never know. Maybe I'll learn some cool shit. Now that I think about it, there will be quite a lot of espionage happening there, so maybe you'll see another one of these. In the meantime, I'll have a campaign diary for a study in effluence coming probably next week. Catch you later.